I'm a former Ironman champion, a professional athlete for a long time, and had a beautiful run in ocean sport, getting to know and understand the way the currents moved and the way energy moved. And whilst the competition was intense, and it seemed like you're actually in a battle with someone else, the whole time what I was actually learning about was how things flow and what stops flow, what blocks flow, what unhooks you from it, taps you back into it. And so I had a lot of success finding a place inside of myself where I found flow, and the ocean would part and magical things would happen. And so I had a reputation for that, but still didn't understand exactly how I was doing. I just knew that I was switched on and connected. And right earlier than that, I started winning Ironman races and succeeding. And I was basically a kid that felt like I'd been bullied a lot, and I felt like I had no power. And so it appeared to be that the person who had all the power in the little group the social group we're in, he was the Australian champion. And he seemed to get the girl, got the laughs, got the last say, got to choose when we went, out in the surf and when we left the surf and all that sort of stuff. So the alpha male seemed to call the shots. So I kind of almost had two lives. Like I was married at 19, and from that, I was the good boy that settled down, and, my girlfriend is pregnant, and all right, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to make this work. And then they had this other part of me that felt free when I did all the bad stuff, when I went out there and actually just raced and got all the attention of all the pretty girls and got the drink cards at the nightclub and ended up on the big TV shows, ended up on Baywatch and hanging out with Michael Jackson and Madonna, and all these sort of experiences that I had were kind of like, oh, there's the reward for being the guy that's free, can do whatever he wants to do. And slowly but surely, that part of me took over more, and I started to feel like as if I had a license to do whatever I wanted to. And so what I did was out of integrity or out of ethics with myself, slowly but surely became more regular. And it was not just at the party, it's just I started to not be the guy that I really was, So when you're a celebrity, you don't recognize that you're being encouraged to be in service to self. So the more popular you are, the quicker you'll buy that new house or that new car or get flown off to that destination for that trip or whatever, and you'll be invited to the best parties and all that sort of stuff. So very much the energy of seduction and the energy of like, hey, you do this and you'll get a bit of that. In my experience, it was just like all I needed to be sucked into being a part of the crew was just tell me I'm looking great and tell me you're a hero, tell me you're a legend, we love you, pump me up full of acknowledgement, and next minute I'm down the path being a version of myself that's not true. It's much simpler to get there than you think, because it's basically built on insecurity. I actually my body started to react. So I had hip problems and collapsed arch and right knee. I had tendonitis in both shoulders. I was aching in my neck. I was constantly on anti-inflammatories and antibiotics, and I wore it like a badge of honor. Ironmen train so hard that we're almost always sick, and what it actually was I was out of ethics with myself, and this part of me that was the winner was out of ethics with the guy that was actually more about the community and the love and the connection and, what I really loved about my family. So these two things created dis-ease inside of me, and I ended up with pretty chronic tendonitis and all these other things. And I went through all the medicines and all the different things that I could do to fix it. And then I eventually met a chiropractor, a kinesiologist who was a bit out there. Certainly from my perspective, he was way out there. And he just said two really simple things to me. And one was, you seem to have some allergies. I think you might be dairy intolerant. And then the second thing he said was, you seem to have some anger issues that like suppressed anger. He just straight up said this, he hadn't even touched me. And what happened was I straight away thought to myself, who the hell does this guy think he is? And I could feel myself feeling like violently angry, but still smiling on the surface. And I was still the good guy on the surface, but the guy that was allowed to get away with whatever he wanted to, just being called on it, And so that part of me, like this alter ego, was marching around behind myself, ready to punch this guy out or whatever it was. And so I remember thinking, mental note to self, you do appear to be angry about what he just said, So the awakening came from my body saying, I can't cope with this anymore. And he actually said to me, your body's telling me if you don't solve a couple of things, you won't win another world title. And at that stage, I was led into awakening because I didn't want to lose that world title because the winner gets everything. And so the loser gets nothing. So it was like life or death. So I was going to come back and see him to make sure I win that world title, knowing that I'd tried every other avenue out. So my awakening came from me wanting to win more, which was still very asleep aspect of myself. But I drove away and I was thinking to myself, who's this guy I think he is? And as I drove down the road, I shook my arm or shoulder while I was driving the car, and I actually went, I don't appear to be hurting. Like, my shoulder's not hurting. Yeah, my hip's not hurting. I'm like moving everything around. I'm like, I'm not actually in pain. I'd been in pain for years. And then this other, almost like higher mind, this voice in my head said, he told you the truth. And I went, what? And I just popped, and everything went still, and everything went deep. Like the 3D was very deep. The trees had depth to them. It was like I was out of the illusion that I was trying to win and lose in, and all of a sudden everything had depth. And I drove down the hill going, what happened to me? And so that was the first moment that I hadn't just had an awakened feeling, because I'd done that in racing. I would race and I'd get myself into the moment. I'd go into a place that I called effortless effort. And when I got in that effortless effort, I knew when to slow down. Like, I knew what the waves were going to do. I didn't even have to look at them. I could feel the ocean. And years later, I met and became great friends with Kelly Slater. And he said exactly the same thing. And I was like, I could finally talk about this connection with the ocean. So I'd had those experiences, but he's just told me this stuff. And I'm driving down a hill and I just popped out into the moment and into peace, into no suffering, no pain. I was like, wow, that was incredible. I'm going back. So that started a journey of me beautifully winding out of racing, where the next year I raced and we had 10 international level races, and I had got 8 first places in 2 seconds, and I was training less. I was smiling on the line. I wasn't nervous. My body was in great condition, but I wasn't even really trying. I was just in flow the whole time. So I feel very blessed to have had an experience at the end of racing that gave me a taste of what would racing be like if you were actually in the moment, if you weren't brutally trying to win all the time. And why I love that is because so many people have said to me, yes, but if you awoke earlier, would you have won anything? Would you have had that career? And I'm like, well, funny you should say that, because I had the results straight after I woke up, and it was the best results I had by far. So it was like, it's not only is it great to be free of all this drama, but actually it makes you perform better anyway. So that took me down a whole path of understanding, what is this energy? Where is it really coming from? Who am I? Why do I feel so alive and open and free? And also, why am I looking around and no one else is experiencing this? So that started a very interesting journey. And even back to when I raced, I remember warming up, swimming out to the back sandbank of the ocean, big crowd waiting on the beach and TV cameras and a live event ready to run, and everyone's super nervous, and I just got this feeling to escape the arena and swim out the back. And I swim out the back and I stand up on a sandbank, and there's this wind blowing. And as I stand up above the water and open my eyes and look, and the wind blows in my face, and it accelerates and blows in my face like with a pressure that says, I've got you. And I'm like, who are you? Like, who's got me? You know, so these are my earliest experiences of nature saying, I'm your best friend, you know, I've got your back. And I always said the ocean is emotion. And I called it a spiritual bath, not knowing what that even meant. And I said, I always come out of the ocean a better person than I go into it. But I always felt like the ocean was my most loyal girlfriend. You know, at times when I was searching and chasing and trying to find the one or be the one or whatever it was, the one that had me all the time was the ocean. So I had this beautiful experience of winning races in front of tens of thousands of people and, you know, millions watching on TV. And what actually happened was I had a connection with the ocean. You know, what actually didn't dominate a sporting field, I actually found love, you know, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of a concept of competition, which goes back to me saying the great lie is that we're all separate and the great truth is we're one. That oneness would bring me through it. But when I answer the question and the emotion comes up is because I've been called from the coast recently, and I've moved out into a valley, and I'm right at the end of the valley, and I'm literally on a property that I don't know how we've ended up with this place, that has a waterfall falling out of a rainforest in front of our lounge room door. and there's like multiple swimming holes and everything else. And when the rain starts falling, the water builds up so fast and runs down that it creates a reverse wave right in front of our, so I can walk out the back door, my wife can sit on the couch and watch me surfing in the creek underneath a waterfall, you know, and I'm having these experiences of the whole rainforest speaking to me every single morning, you know, and it's really hitting me that I'm not separate from that experience, that is actually who I am, you know, and whatever's held in that beautiful experience of the whole forest and the way it works, every day that I let it in a little bit more, I heal a little bit more. And even my own past plot lines and stories start to straighten out even more, to become a really beautiful understanding of the full circle, started in nature and finished in nature.